Welcome to Lancefield on the Line. My name is David Lancefield. I'm delighted, if a little daunted, to welcome Melissa Lund. Melissa is a personal stylist and image coach to the stars, executives and leaders all around the world. And Melissa, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. And that's a great introduction. Now I've got to live up to it, haven't I?
You do indeed. You do indeed. Part of this series is all about making sure that leaders give their best image in all their contexts, both what they say and how they say it. So I'm keen to sort of look at all angles, if you like. This is not about me, so we're not doing a self-assessment, but I'm sure, no doubt, you will be giving me pointers as we go through. But if you look at the landscape now, and obviously we've been through a lockdown period, but even before, and you looked at the sort of, if you like, the standard, the benchmark around how people come across, what they give off, how they look. What are the sort of themes, and how would you summarize the sort of the landscape?
Well, I think in general, even before the pandemic, people don't make enough effort, or they haven't been making enough effort. And I would say that kind of goes across all levels. So most of my clients are very senior in business, but not
Yeah.
always. Sometimes they can be more mid-level or even entry level, or sometimes they can be working with startups, but most of them are really kind of very senior in business. And constantly I'm seeing things where I look at people and think, you're not quite getting it right. You're not making enough of an effort. And there could be several reasons for that. The one that springs to mind is they have perhaps been in one organization for a long time, so they
Yes.
don't feel that there's anything to prove. And indeed, there isn't. Their reputation is established, so they feel that that's all okay. I think the other area that could be relevant is that sometimes people don't think that this kind of thing is important. So quite often I'll get people who say, and they're quite senior again, they might say, isn't what's on the inside more important than what's on the
Right.
outside?
Yes.
So both of those things I think are relevant in how people respond to the whole notion of image and personal styling and presence.
And is there, you covered a huge amount of ground there. I'm going to dip into a
Mm.
few areas. Is there any particular triggers that you see where people suddenly, either through self-reflection or indeed in conversation with you, say, oh, I now need to have a, whatever the right term is, makeover. I need to look at myself again. I now realize it's important. Are there any particular triggers or moments?
Yes, usually they're transitional periods in life, and they could be anything. They could be getting a promotion. They could be being phased out of an organization or company. They could be changing career. Thinking about some of my clients in the past, I have worked with people who've maybe gone down the consultancy route and then gone back into the executive route at a very senior level.
Yes.
Suddenly they realize that the way they're presenting themselves is not going to do for what they're doing next. But it tends to be a transitional phase of some description that actually triggers that. Could even be an aging thing. It's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? But you could hit, 40, 50, 60 and think, okay, my life is changing, and maybe how I present myself needs to change.
I mean, you talked earlier about why people may not think image, the
Mm,
way they come across, is important enough. Is that because they, I don't know, perhaps think that it's all about the content of what they say?
yeah.
I just wondered in your conversation, when you actually delve into the why is it not important, what sort of answers do you get?
I think people like to think that the content is super important, and of course it is.
Yes.
What you've got to say for yourself is hugely important. But the issue we all have is that when we step out in the world, people will respond to us, first of all, particularly in any kind of new meeting or first impression, when we're making first impression, people respond to us basically by how we look, how we present
Yes.
ourselves, how
Yes.
we walk into the room. What's your body language like? How do you shake hands in the days when we were allowed to do that?
Yes.
What's your voice like? Is it friendly or is it threatening? What do you like as a person? And that starts with how you look.
Hmm.
And you can't get around that.
It's interesting you going through the number of questions there, a number of themes, and
Mm,
what I take from that is it's something you've got to do well. It's properly skillful, takes
yeah.
practice, probably takes
Yeah.
some discipline too. But it's no different from another activity which might be preparing for a meeting, which might be I'm going to hopefully read the papers if there's any papers sent. I'm going to think about the
Yeah.
points I want to make, how I present myself. It's an extension of, I guess, a habit or a work practice which you have to learn. Right?
It really is. And the way I think about it is that it's a business tool. You know, it's not airy fairy. It is a business tool. And whatever business we're in and whatever level we're at, we need to present ourselves in such a way that we gain traction with the people we need to gain traction with. And if we don't handle this properly, then we're just making it so much harder for ourselves to get that traction and to really enhance credibility. And it is, as you said, it's about preparation. This isn't rocket science, but it is about sitting down and thinking, how do I need to present myself? How am I going to do it? What do I need to do physically?
And it's interesting you said there that it's all levels, because I think some people, when you talk about, you know, style, presence, gravitas, we often associate it with particular senior roles in whatever type of organization. But actually, you just said there it's a set of practices and mindset, I guess, at all levels, right? Obviously, the budgets
Yeah.
may be different,
Yeah,
expectations may be different, but it is for everyone, right?
absolutely. Budgets are different, expectations different, but actually, we always need to have eyes on the prize. What job do you want next? What role do you want next? And there's an old saying which still holds true, which is dress for the job you want, not the job you've got. So
Right.
you're always, and you know why that really works? It's because when people can see you and they think, oh, you could actually be doing this job already, that's half the battle won. That's kind of your entry ticket, if you like.
Hmm. That's really interesting. And I guess it all has to work together, whatever you do, in terms of how you look. And I'm feeling even
Yeah.
more self-conscious as I say this. I remember in our conversation a number of months ago now, where you gave an example. I don't think it was of me for once, where somebody may have looked pretty good, but for example, and they were dressing, I guess, for the job they wanted, but they had a chewed up biro pen that they were using. I
Yeah.
think there's an example like that which illustrates the point that everything sort of has to work together, as
Yeah.
opposed to looking, I don't know, an amazing suit and scruffy trainers, etc.
Yeah. 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 It has to be throughout the person. It has to be consistent throughout. So you're right. You can't have a really nice suit and a horrible pair of shoes, or the other way around. Or, we're talking about lockdown here, and personal grooming has been very difficult for everybody in lockdown because we haven't had
Yes.
access to our normal places.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to have decent looking hair. We need to have hands that look cared for. We need to use a nice pen or maybe have a nice watch. It's all about quality, actually. It's about saying,
Hmm.
actually, it's about respect for the person you're meeting, really, because you're saying, look, I am dressing to show my respect for you and for the situation.
That's a really interesting way to frame it, which is actually, so it's not just about you and how you look and how you feel. That
That's
makes
really
sense.
important as well, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's about the respect. So, for example, if you are in a business where you offer a premium service and charge accordingly,
yep,
um, the first impression will be, bluntly, are they worth it? They may have the best idea coming through at some point, and
yeah,
they may give me the great outcome that I'm looking for. But if I don't feel it initially, I guess
yeah,
it gives. What does it do? It creates a distance, mistrust, question marks,
yes.
anxiety.
It creates cognitive dissonance so that when you see that person, you do that little step back. And we all know that you can't do that because you know how this works, that we have about 30 seconds to make an impact, to make an impression on someone.
Hmm.
And if you are that person who is selling a premium service and turned up to your new client and you look not at all premium, you're not really going to believe that you can do the job.
Yes.
And you might have the most amazing ideas in the world, you really might, but you're making it so much harder for yourself if you don't kind of make your client or your potential client feel comfortable with you. So it's about making sure that they know that you can deliver what you're saying you can.
Yes. And when we talked earlier about the moments, transitions, new
Mm,
jobs, life changes, where people start thinking about these sorts of things a lot, or
mm.
practicing these things a lot more. How do you do it in a way that's feels like it's a natural transition, rather than, if you like,
Yeah,
one moment you're a scruff bag, and then the next
yeah,
moment you sort of take the mask off and hey, here I am. And
Yeah,
I've seen equivalent. I'm not going to name them. I've seen people do that where literally within the space of a week they come. It's like they're on a catwalk, male or female, and
yeah,
it's sort of, and it doesn't feel comfortable. They don't come. I've seen it in job interviews as well, where somebody's
yeah,
put on an amazing suit, etc., etc., and they're spending most of the interview going,
yeah.
how
I
do you
mean,
make the transition work?
that was going to be my question. That's a really interesting question to you, I guess, is that you noticed that those people didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah,
And I
but
think you can't, as somebody who's been in this business for a long time, what you can't do with most people is you can't suddenly go, right, here you are, scruffy person. I'm going to turn you into this mannequin. Absolutely not. Because the one thing that people have got to be is comfortable in their clothes. They've got to look
yes,
comfortable.
yes,
And I mean mental comfort and physical comfort.
mm,
So
mm,
physical comfort comes from a nice fit and a good cloth
yes,
and good quality. So you're not sitting there going,
yeah.
looking really uncomfortable, because
Mm.
ants in your pants is not a very good look, is it? But, but mental comfort is about looking in the mirror and going, yeah, good to go. I like that.
Mm.
And that's
That's,
important, really
so
important.
when you're working with your clients, how much of your work is around, if you like, the inner self, the mental part, versus if you like, the physical? I know they go together, but I'm just conscious that at first
Yeah,
sight I might have thought, wait, it's about having a look at how somebody looks and coming
yeah.
up with a new dress, wardrobe, and so on. But how much is about the inner person?
It depends on the person, but sometimes there is a lot of work on the inner person. And I'll put it out there right now, I'm not a psychologist at all.
Mm.
But what I always try to assess is how the person feels about how they look. Because basically, we are going to be discussing very intimate things, which is, how does this person look? How do they come across?
Yes, yes.
Is there anything they feel uncomfortable about? And I'm not there to judge. I am there to make sure that they're going to look the best version of themselves.
Mm.
And that for me is the key to a really good makeover. So you take what the person's got, and what I'll be concentrating on is making sure that physically they look their best
Mm.
and that they feel really comfortable. And
Yes.
so what that doesn't mean is imposing my taste or my style on them. I can't suddenly go, right, wear this. I mean, if somebody's going to be my model for Business Big Shot, or I'm doing a catwalk show, they have no opinion and no input. Their job is to show the clothing.
Indeed.
If I'm working with a real person, most of my clients are real people, I need to showcase them.
Yes.
I need to make them look great and feel great.
Mm. When you're doing that work, particularly over the last number of months,
Mm.
how has your business changed, and
Mm.
how has the sort of questions that you've had to address changed in that period?
Good question. When this first happened, I wondered how I was going to carry on with my business because, of
Mm.
course, we don't all have major video conferencing suites.
Mm.
But I figured out a way to do it, which is I asked the client to send me some modeling shots,
Right,
basically.
right.
So we have business wear, front, back, and side, full length shots, and then we have something that shows the shape of the body, front, back, and side.
Mm.
I get those before the session, and then I have a chat. So the session pretty much goes as normal. But I think what's changed also is we have to navigate some slightly different dress codes. And we also have to talk about how people come across on a digital platform, because it is different.
Mm.
And I think many of the things that we would use to assess a person to see whether we want involvement with them,
Mm.
that we just sort of take on board by osmosis, if you will, in a digital platform, they're not there.
Yes, yes. I talked about coherence earlier,
Hmm.
um, and coherence comes in a number of forms. But one thing I've also seen is, if you like, see executives of all different types and backgrounds. They dress for the part in all for set piece occasions,
Yeah. Yeah.
the big pitch, the presentation, and I'm not suggesting they then sort of go off stage and then change,
Yeah.
but they often have different personas, images in different parts of their day and their week, and sometimes it doesn't matter, but they are more, leaders are very visible individuals, right?
Yeah.
Either through Zoom calls and so on, or in person, they are being watched all the time. And I wondered how much, if you like, continuity of the look matters, as opposed to people recognizing, oh, you know what, it doesn't really matter now because you're not in the boardroom, you're not in, the big presentation.
Actually, it matters hugely because I think people need to be consistent. The thing about presenting a personal brand, and you can call it your personal brand, you can call it your personal PR,
Hmm.
it's the bit that you do after the first impression. So when you meet somebody for the first time, you've got to get off on the right foot.
Yes.
But after that, you've got to make sure that you are really presenting your personal brand consistently and authentically. So it matters hugely. I think when we're doing the big presentation, we might decide that we want our very best suit and that our hair must be right. And we need to do everything to make ourselves feel comfortable and in the zone. So we do the prep. We do the prep with our practicing what we're going to say and doing our rehearsal, etc. We do all
Yes.
that. We're ready. And we also think then, like an actor, what's my costume? And it's not a
Hmm.
costume that is not authentic. It's a costume that's actually authentic to you, but it's something that's going to make you feel absolutely your best. So you might decide, oh, that's the suit I love to wear for my presentations. But for the rest of the time, you do need to be also sending the same message. So you can't be in kind of clothes that don't fit with the scruffy shoes with the horrible hair the rest of the time. You can't do it.
Yes. I see quite a lot of men of a certain age, and I'm going to hopefully not offend any of my audience, who do that sort of on that sort of what used to be called dress down Friday or the away day, where you
Yeah.
turn up and you think, wow, you haven't worn that sort of gear for a while, haven't you? I've
Yeah.
probably done it myself, but let's move on from that. But let's move on before I get even more embarrassed. Let's get even more real for a moment. I mean, you've been
Oh,
very
no.
candid as ever, which I appreciate, and very specific. Um, are, Give me some names of individuals of that you think. And I don't mean your client, but perhaps people may know. It could be actors, it could be business people.
Yep.
You think what they have a personal brand and identity.
Okay. Actually, do you know that's a really difficult question because I kept thinking about it and I kept thinking, well, nearly, but not quite. And
Oh,
I've
you
got
have
to
a
say,
high bar. You have a very high
I,
bar.
yeah, I do have a high bar.
Yeah, I
But,
knew that.
but also, what's quite interesting is that all the people I came up with are not young. They're not spring chickens.
Hmm.
So people I can think of who are in the public eye who, people may or may not know them. Some they will, some they won't. Let's go with the one they might not. Edward Enninful, editor of Vogue. He is the first male editor, he's the first black man, and he's the first gay man to edit Vogue.
Hmm.
He looks fabulous. He's got a complete uniform, the beautiful black suit, the white shirt, the statement specs. Fab.
You sort of
Night,
think he would get it, right? I mean, working for that, if he hasn't got this, but yes,
you
yes.
do, but actually, I see a lot of other fashion people, who don't look that great, in my opinion. And I'm not going to
Oh,
name.
hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes people don't actually realize what the building blocks are. It's not enough to say, I like that piece of clothing, I'm going to wear it.
Hmm.
You've actually got to think about what is going to suit your body type and your body shape and your proportions. And sometimes people are fixated on wearing the latest thing and it doesn't always work for them.
Right, right.
Other people I think are great. Bill Nye,
Yes,
beautiful saddle row tailoring. Um, and for the women, actually, both of my women are French. So I very much like Brigitte Macron's style. I think she's always very elegant and
indeed.
appropriate for what she has to do. And then Catherine Watford, who's the former editor of French Vogue, who I thought was also very stylish. The people I like personally have got, yeah, quite definitely a personal style, definitely a personal brand. It's definitely, you could recognize them a mile away.
And they made a choice, right? They made a choice about who they are and how they want to come across,
Yeah,
and in many of those cases, they know they're going to be photographed, and covered in a high profile position, so
yeah,
they want to make sure the image is given off.
absolutely,
I mean, you talked
absolutely.
about obviously men and women there. It's good to have some
Yeah.
different examples. Beyond the obvious differences, what other things would you say are subtleties or differences that a man and a woman should consider in terms of their image? I know you've written a lot about women in business, for example, and how they have to, dress and style and so on. But are there any particular differences or subtleties?
Good question. When I'm working with people, I don't really differentiate that much between men and women and what I'm going to say, because the science behind it all is the same, and it applies to um, men, women, all ages and stages. So that the basic bare bones of the thing are not something I have to differentiate. But the absolutely unacceptable thing, I suppose, it seems quite unacceptable, is that we always think that women are fair game, in the sense that people are always making judgment, or seem to be making judgments more often about women and their appearance.
Yeah.
I'm being a bit disingenuous there, because having just had the American elections, etc., we certainly realise that when men are in the public eye, people do start to say things about them as well. I think what's interesting for me is when um, a woman works in an area which is mainly male dominated.
Yes.
And then I think for them, the issue is sometimes around gravitas and traction. And there are certain things that you can do. And I think the downside for women as well is that if a woman is doing business casual, it's very easy to strip away all the gravitas that she's worked hard to build up. And in fact, I know one woman CEO who never does business casual for that exact reason.
Right. Gosh.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, that term gravitas. I just want to delve into
mm,
that. Um, when you've I'll come back to the gender point in a moment, but I'm struck with the point of gravitas. You sort of
mm.
know it, don't you, when you see somebody,
Yeah,
when they walk in, or you see them on screen or whatever. It's obvious. It's a bit like
yeah,
charisma as well. But
yeah.
gravitas, what for you, when you probably work with through different lenses, much more expert lenses than many of us, of course. But when you say, "Oh, that person has gravitas," what is it? What in a nutshell do they have?
Authenticity, credibility, mastery of their brief, comfort. So if we're looking at someone who's doing a big presentation and they've got to walk into the room, they're not mincing about on the edges. They're not mousing in, going, "Oh my goodness, I feel nervous." Even if they are feeling nervous, they're going to
Yes.
stride in with a certain level of comfort, knowing that they have mastered the brief, prepped how they look so they feel comfortable, rehearsed everything. They're comfortable with where they are and who they're speaking to.
Yes. And authenticity, what does that mean to you?
Being true to yourself. Don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable. Whether that is having to deliver a certain message that you don't want to, that's another thing. But in my area, it means don't wear something that you don't like and it doesn't make you feel comfortable. And if I could give somebody one piece of advice about dressing, it would be only wear things you love.
Yes.
Because if you don't, you're just going to feel uncomfortable, and then you don't have that credibility, the calmness, the gravitas. It's all kind of taken away from you.
Yes. Just going back to the point about dress down, and how one woman said that she would never do that. One
Yeah.
CEO. I know another senior female executive who said that on a similar theme said, um, "I can't let my guard down. I've got to look my A game at all times because I'm in a male-dominated world,
Yeah.
um, and I need to make sure that I have sufficient impact." And that struck me on a number of levels. One is sort of my initial reaction: "Geez, are we still like that?" Not criticizing her, but in the environment where
Yeah.
somebody has
Yeah.
to feel in that way. But I wonder if that's a comment that you've heard before, and if so, in a way, where does it come from? Because this person in particular, I can't name her, highly talented,
Mm,
amazing at the job, irrespective of candidly of
mm.
of that helps, of course, in terms of image. But is it about lack of confidence? Is it because of a dominant group of people that she has to find a way to sort of impress? I know it's a delicate topic, and forgive me
Yeah.
if I get my words
Yeah.
wrong, but
No. No.
I'm
No.
curious because I'm passionate
Mm,
about getting the best people
mm.
to have the best roles as opposed to being one
Yeah.
particular group. That's something I'm passionate of, real
No,
passion
I
about.
think it is a delicate topic, and but it's not one that I ever shy away from, because I think it's important. And just to give you a real life example, I worked a while back with a very senior CFO, who's marvelous, and one of her briefs to me was, she said, Melissa, I'm so sick of going to meetings and my male colleague comes with me and everybody assumes he's the senior person, and in fact it's me. And I said, okay, we're going to change what you wear, because what you're wearing at the moment is not saying the right things to the people you're meeting. And I think that happens quite often because, you know, sometimes women may think, oh, well, I can wear a dress and a cardigan and flat shoes, and actually that isn't going to cut it when you're in front of someone who's maybe wearing a gorgeous suit. They just don't think that you're going to be on the same level. And you then have to work so much harder to actually get your point across and to
Yes.
think incredibly. So I think there is an element of not feeling confident, but I think there is an element of people wanting to respond maybe um, to seeing maybe the man in the room as the more senior when perhaps that isn't always the case.
I guess it's the reality that we make, whether we like it or not, we make judgments about, as you said at the beginning, about how
Yep.
people look.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to go with it. You have to
Yeah.
both obviously dress and act and be yourself with skill and panache and your own brand. At the same time, recognize that people are making judgments about you. So
Yeah.
I know a number of people who sort of say, I don't really need to do what we described because
Yeah.
I'm really good at my job. I've been here long
Yeah.
enough, so that may be the long time person in
Yeah.
the organisation, or this person, for example, insert Silicon Valley founder, only wears jeans and a t-shirt and so on. And I
Yeah.
sort of think, well, you're not them. Secondly, that is their brand,
Yeah.
and there aren't many people who can really get away with some of
Yeah.
those. Well, that's probably appropriate for that particular context. But you're, in this case, you're in a corporate that's a lot more traditional. So
Yeah.
there's a bit about, you sort of got to get the context you're in.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I do get that kind of flung at me from time to time when people say, but so-and-so only ever wears jeans and a t-shirt. And my response is, well, they're in a tech company. They own the tech company, so they can
Yes.
wear what they like, okay? I said,
Yeah.
if you own that company, you can wear what you like. But if you don't own the company, it's about what the people you're engaging with expect to see in you. And
Yeah.
if you don't give it to them, it's a bit difficult. And coming back to what you said there about the person having been in an organization for a long time, totally true. They don't have to prove themselves anymore. But the problem often comes when they then leave that company for whatever reason and they're trying to find something else. They then have to think, right, okay, how do I navigate this dress code? And the thing about people making judgments about us is, yes, they do. We can't stop that because it's how the human animal responds.
Yes.
Response. We are hardwired to respond that way. But what we have to be able to do is manage it. It's about management.
Hmm. The more I listen, I mean, the more that I reflect on myself, but that's my own thing. But this is properly skillful. This is a skillful, thoughtful, very practical aspect of a leader's, whatever your toolkit, mindset,
Yeah.
practice day to day.
Yeah.
So to bring this to a close, so 2021, we all hope
Yep.
it's going to be a better year for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. To put it
Yep.
mildly, say something obvious, David. What would be your sort of wishes for a senior executive in the area you're in? What would you encourage them to do and think about?
Dress nicely for their Zoom meetings, please. I mean, okay, we're at home, we're in our home office if we're lucky enough to have one, but we're still doing business. And I think what I've noticed is that I've appreciated how you've worn a nice jacket and an open neck shirt today. And I think that's pretty much the perfect thing for a meeting because you're a really nice shoulder line. That gives you a bit more presence in the room, in the Zoom room,
Yes.
trademark.
Yeah.
And I've seen people wearing terrible things. So t-shirts, and beyond a certain age, a man in a round neck t-shirt, I'm really sorry, but it's not going to work. Not even if you're George Clooney, it's not going to work.
Not even George.
No, not even George. Get rid of the t-shirts, people. Not even Tom Ford. You know. So I think at the very least, a nice shirt, and make sure the quality of everything is good because the webcams are quite high definition.
Yes.
Do your hair and makeup if you're a woman, grooming if you're a man, and just pay more attention to the detail, because some of us, at least in Europe at the moment, we're not having face-to-face meetings. We are having digital meetings, and they are for us the real deal at the moment.
Indeed, indeed. So, on an optimistic note, when we get back to a face-to-face environment,
Yeah.
please, right, in some
Yeah.
shape or form, whether it's a hybrid environment or not, anything to be aware of? Because obviously, that for many of us, as you say, particularly in Europe and parts of the world, um, that'll be quite a change. That'll be quite a change. Is there anything if somebody said to you, "I'm going back. It's my first big week in the office.
Yeah.
What do I need to think about? What do I need to do? Any tips, advice?"
Yes, I would think about what your personal brand is. Have a look in your wardrobe, so the kind of practicalities of this. Try on some of your clothes, because some of us may have gained or lost in lockdown, and fit is really, really important.
Indeed.
So often I see people with clothes that don't fit, and that really is kind of, what are they not paying attention to? That pains me. So check that everything's okay, and check that the moths haven't got to it. So do all the practical things, and just really take some time and reflect and think, what is my personal brand, and how am I going to put that out there so that I get traction and the best response from everybody around me. Yeah.
The power of the personal brand comes through, the power of the respect for the individuals you're with, the coherence with your brand promise, and coherence of what you're all doing, or all elements to it. There's some very practical questions and things you've raised throughout. Does it fit? Right? Does it look good enough?
Yeah.
This is an integral part of the makeup and, pun intended, mindset and toolkit of a leader. Melissa, I've been incredibly grateful for your time. It's been riveting. It's not been too embarrassing for me, although I'm sure we'll do that on a private basis. Thank you ever so much. This was Lancefield on the Line, and my name is David Lancefield.
David.